Hello, and welcome to this brief webinar on lived experience advisory groups. We will be going over a survey that I recently completed of suicide prevention and crisis intervention organizations about their utilization of lived experience advisory groups, and also organizations that have lived experience members at the committee level. So either board of directors, steering committee, or planning council. So thanks for being here today, and we'll get into the content here. So a quick overview of the survey. This webinar is going to focus mostly on the implementation guide that accompanies this survey. But I did just want to provide a quick, high-level overview of some of the takeaways from this survey. So the survey received a total of 64 filtered responses from suicide prevention and crisis intervention organizations. Most organizations were within the United States, but we did have some international responses as well, notably from Australia and Canada. Some members of the EU also. So some of the things that I noticed from this survey, lived experience advisory groups, while they might be a bit of a new phenomenon, there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure that people with lived experience of suicide, whether that's folks who have suicidal ideation, who have attempted previously, those that are bereaved by suicide, and also those who have, cared for others in whatever other category that may be. So there's still a lot of work to make sure that those folks, that their voices are heard, and these advisory groups are, one of the best ways to do that currently. So despite that, only 25% of responding organizations had a lived experience advisory group already in place. Likely, that might be an overestimate as well, with some of the organizations responding to this survey, might have been kind of more predisposed to having lived experience advisory groups, because that's what the survey focused on. So still a lot of improvement in the prevalence of those lived experience advisory groups. The lived experience advisory groups scored higher on perceptions of diversity. So there were quite a few sort of demographic questions related to diversity. And the lived experience advisory groups had higher scores on almost all of those demographics than their committee level counterparts there. So lived experience advisory groups also showed higher rates of suggestions being absorbed into their respective organizations. So we looked at that, or I looked at that a few different ways. How likely those suggestions are to be absorbed. One of the ways that I approached that was if an organization has had an initiative that had to be adjusted or was stopped based upon the feedback of lived experience, whether that's at the advisory group level, as the survey kind of focused on, or at the committee level with boards of directors, steering committees, and planning councils. So respondents from the organizational boards of directors, steering committees, and state behavioral health planning councils, they didn't view lived experience members as tokens, but thought that their organizations were less likely to seek out and include individuals with lived experience of suicide. So there's, especially when it comes to decision-making processes. So, there is some tension there with including folks with lived experience of suicide at the committee level, so rather than having a dedicated lived experience advisory group. All right, so that's a quick overview of some of the takeaways from the survey. At the end of this webinar, I will share the link to the survey homepage where you can visit the data dashboard, and I'll also have a QR code where you can download the implementation guide as well. Implementation guide is also available on the survey homepage. All right, so the implementation guide focuses on 4 competencies: scope, recruitment, structure, and absorption of suggestions, which we've talked about a little bit already. And then also the implementation guide also has references and quick links page to kind of house some of the materials that I've come across in my research, hopefully to make it a little bit easier for folks to kind of find those resources on, starting a lived experience group of your own. All right, so we'll move into the first competency here, scope. So the implementation guide is broken down between sort of guiding questions and important considerations. I thought it important not to dictate or be prescriptive with what these advisory groups should necessarily look like, but there's some important things to consider when establishing, and some questions that'll be helpful to ask yourself. So in terms of scope, really important to get to the purpose of the advisory group. Is this going to be, just a single initiative? Is this an ongoing sort of advisement? These scoping questions are really important so that you can clearly instruct the advisory group on what they should be focused on. What are the, where's the boundaries for their participation and the suggestions that you're looking for? By scoping the advisory group properly, you'll be able to get clearer recommendations from the folks involved. So here's, you can see the sort of guiding questions here. One approach in sort of scoping the advisory groups that I talk about here is a process of visioning. So this is where folks at the organization come together and talk about, what they would like the advisory group to look like. And in that exchange of ideas, in that free exchange of ideas, you can get some, good ideas of what the advisory group should look like. And hopefully in the exchange of those ideas, you'll kind of, be able to throw out some suggestions or rework some suggestions and have others that maybe you weren't considering because of folks with different viewpoints coming together and talking about what the advisory group should necessarily look like. And again, I also talk a little bit here about mission drift. If the advisory group isn't sort of scoped appropriately, it's easy to for the advisory group to begin to focus on a whole wide range of issues that maybe is not what you might be looking for. So important to kind of keep that in mind as well. And so we'll keep it moving here into recruitment. So one of the big considerations that I decided to focus on for recruitment was diversity of opinions and experiences. These are the diversity and demographics that were asked about in the survey, and also the 4 different types of lived experience of suicide. And the LSEPI that you'll see there, that will be linked at the end there. At the end of the presentation, you'll be able to go to the website and go. That's from Roses in the Ocean, which is an Australian group. Lots of great resources there. So want to be sure that we're paying attention to the blind spots that we might be having in regard to diversity. Are we including all the sort of different points of view that should be at the table? Again, depending upon the scope of the advisory group. So you'll see the different sort of diversities, whether that's sort of identities or demographics that I chose to kind of focus on. Again, like your advisory group may focus on different things, so important to keep that in mind. When it comes to how to recruit individuals for your lived experience advisory group, first things to do can be engage stakeholder networks. And you can also engage those internal and external organizational networks as well. By reaching out to those networks, you can sort of start to get the word out about recruiting for the lived experience advisory group. So yeah, of course, we want to be sure to recruit from the population that's being served. And sort of the focus of the lived experience advisory group is to get that, to get that specific experience involved and to hear those voices that maybe aren't being included in your organization already, or maybe to have a more formalized process for those suggestions and recommendations to be absorbed into the organization, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So yeah, and then there's also a good resource from Roses in the Ocean as well about a readiness to be involved questionnaire. This helps you to kind of gauge an individual's likelihood of, whether they're ready to be involved in the advisory group or whatever engagement you're talking about. So that can be helpful as well. All right. So here we are with structure. As you look over this slide, I think it's important to consider who is determining the structure of the advisory group. Is this going to be sort of a top-down from the organization that's sort of deciding what the structure is going to be? Is it going to be bottom-up, where members of the lived experience advisory group decide what the structure is going to be like for themselves? Is this going to be some kind of vertical hierarchical structure or more of a horizontal kind of structure to the governance of the advisory group? Some of the considerations that were asked about in the survey included: does your group have a mission statement, a charter, bylaws, agreed upon norms, and chairs? Also, are those chairs appointed? Are they elected? So some things to kind of keep in mind there. Again, trying to link the structure to the scope as well. If this is not an ongoing advisory group setting, maybe there might be different considerations than if it's an ongoing advisory group. From the survey, it seemed like most advisory groups were established and didn't have necessarily term limits for their members. Some advisory groups chose to have either 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year term limits for their members. Most organizations seemed like they didn't have any term limits. So you'll see also the important considerations here. what you want the governance structure to look like, or whether you want the advisory group to kind of co-create that structure with the organization itself. So, some things to think about in terms of how to structure the advisory group. All right, and then absorption of suggestions. Sorry there. So here we talk about, I kind of talk about a formalized structure or formalized processes, I should say, for incorporating the suggestions and recommendations of the advisory group into the organization. So, you'll see the questions here. Part of that is a process on the advisory group's part. Is that going to be a democratic vote? How does the group want to sort of submit those suggestions? And then the other part of that is sort of a review process on part of the organization, and then a feedback process as well. So letting the advisory group know about which suggestions were incorporated and which weren't, and for what reasons. So we have the process at the advisory group sort of, kind of on the front end about how to make those suggestions, the process for submitting those suggestions, and then a review process and a feedback process. So again, I'm not interested in sort of prescribing or telling your organization what the best thing to do there. I trust that you'll come up with sort of what is going to work best for you. So just some kind of things to think about in terms of formalizing the suggestions of the advisory group. All right. And lastly here, we have the references and the quick links for, the sort of foundational materials for both the implementation guide and from the survey as well. I'll go ahead and share the QR code here. You can download the implementation guide from that QR code. And you can also go, feel free to pause the webinar here if you want to visit the survey homepage. We have, I keep saying we, but it's just me here, So yeah, there's a data dashboard at the survey homepage, as well as the implementation guide is posted there as well. So feel free to, please take a look at that. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. My email is located on the survey homepage, so feel free to reach out to me there if you'd like. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this brief webinar here, and I hope that the implementation guide is helpful. All right, thanks. Take care.